And here we are with episode 60.
Yeah, we've been doing this for 60 episodes now.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, right. It's quite an accomplishment. I mean, uh we've this stemmed from just an idea since ICMI, really. I think that's when we were in initial talks for doing this. And we've been keeping on doing it. We've not slowed down. It's
Exactly, that's right.
something to be proud of, to be sure.
Yeah, 100%. So we've got a few topics for tonight, or today in your case. I wanted to talk briefly about UN women, always a fun
Okay.
topic. There's one specific thing I want to talk about today.
Okay.
Um, Democrats trying to attract men is
Hmm.
another one I want to talk about. And I actually have a few comments on Iraq, which is a bit probably coming out of left field a little bit, but there is a reason why I'm bringing it up tonight in particular, or
Okay.
today. And
Yeah.
of course, great men of history. So, yeah, okay. Do you want to kick off, or shall I start with some of my topics?
Well, you're the guy with the subjects right now. I've got nothing. I'll just fill in where you leave off, I suppose. So
Yep, no problem at all. So, UN Women. This is actually really interesting. So, UN Women is obviously a part of the United Nations, which is a organization with lots of problems. It's obviously very eccentric, but there's a lot of other problems, a lot of corruption in there. I mean, this is the organization that has Saudi Arabia on the Human Rights Council, for
yeah.
example. I don't know if they're on now, but they have been on the past. Yeah, I think from memory, there's something like 47 countries on the Human Rights Council, which is pretty much guarantees you're going to get some that you really probably shouldn't get on there. Anyway,
Hmm.
so anyway, a lot of problems with the United Nations, but something happened just recently, which was actually kind of interesting. We see a lot of posts on X from the UN Women account, but they made a couple of posts, and maybe we could I don't know if we can put these up on the screen, possibly in the video, or we can post them
Yeah,
below or
sure.
something like that. So the first one relates to men's rights activists, and it's really quite a different tone than we usually hear from feminist or feminist aligned organisations. And so this is what they said about men's rights activists. Often take an academic tone to claim that feminism and women's rights to vote, to education, to leadership positions have disadvantaged men. MRA preachers suggest society is gynocentric, that is dominated by feminine interests. So this is really interesting. I've often noted that their side is kind of a bit slow to learn. They're often many years behind us in terms of the stuff we're talking about, and they'd often try to refute things that we weren't even saying. But this is kind of interesting. They've actually picked up on the term gynocentrism, kind of finally, and they're not saying we're misogynists. They're not saying it's a gateway to white supremacy and also all the other nonsense that has been leveled at us in the past. So this is something of a different tone, which I do find interesting. Uh, Almost, but not quite a conciliatory tone, I would say, where they obviously still misrepresent some things, like saying, for example, that women being able to vote or get educated. I would dispute the claim that women have ever not been educated, by the way, but that's a separate issue.
Yeah.
Or having leadership positions have disadvantaged men. Just briefly, yeah, the idea that women have not been educated historically is utter nonsense. Some societies gave men and women, or boys and girls, different education. It gave them education that was suitable for their roles in that society. A lot of it would still overlap, and in a lot of other societies, there was very little difference between the type of education they would get. But the notion that there were societies out there that were deliberately keeping their entire female half of the community ignorant is ridiculous. I mean, it's women who primarily are dealing with very small children and would be teaching small children. So it's utter nonsense. Obviously, voting, the difference between men and women, the period in which men and women vote, as we've said before many times, is generally speaking, if a country became independent in the 19th or 20th century, it was a few years to a few decades in some cases. In a country that became independent in the 21st century, there's normally no difference at all. So this idea that men were voting for thousands of years and women weren't or something, it's just nonsense. And leadership positions, I mean, I've been writing a book for the last 8 years where I talk extensively about how many women were involved in leadership positions historically. And part of the reason why has taken me so long is because there were so many and I kept finding new examples. So all that's nonsense. Anyway, but it is a different tone. Um, the next one, too, is interesting. This is the manosphere, and they refer to this as an umbrella term for online communities that have increasingly promoted narrow and aggressive definitions of what it is to be a man, and the false narrative that feminism and gender equality have come at the cost of men's rights. So again, it's kind of getting kind of better than it was, but still misses the mark. So the manosphere is a very broad term. It refers to a whole bunch of different groups that in many ways don't even get on. I often say that they agree generally on the problems facing men and boys, but disagree on what should be done about them, or even if anything should be done about them.
Yeah.
And then there are, of course, groups who raise men's issues who are not in the manosphere as well. So it's, as I said, they're kind of getting a little bit better there, but they're still missing the mark and still misrepresenting what we're saying and what we're doing. But interesting that they have dropped a lot of the, at least in terms of UN women here, they have dropped a lot of the more inflammatory claims,
Yeah.
apparently.
Hmm.
So I found that interesting. Anyway, yes. Next one I have is Democrats trying to attract men. So, yep, apparently this effort is being led by a couple of women, one of which is Olivia Julianna, and she has some formed with some fairly woke topics in the past. And, I can't speak to how genuine this effort is. I'm sure they're worried about the vote. I'm sure that's genuine, that they're worried about the fact that they're losing men's votes. What they probably want is for men to fall into line rather than actually looking, I would suspect, at really addressing men's issues.
Exactly.
Yep. So, I mean, I'd actually try to stay out of politics because there's kind of centrism on both sides of politics. So I don't generally comment on it much. But I
Right.
think in this case, given that they're actually trying to attract the men's vote and explicitly saying this, I think it's worth us mentioning. So,
Yeah. Yeah, because she's definitely the type that we would rally under.
exactly. That's right.
Mhm.
I think if this is a genuine effort, then they've made a mistake. So
Yeah.
we'll see. Maybe they'll figure that out at some point in the future, and try again. I don't know. The next one I have is, I might talk about Olivia Juliana more in a future
Yeah, sure.
episode. Actually, I just wanted to briefly mention them. Yeah.
That's fine.
So Iraq. So this is an interesting one. So I this is something that's probably been a little bit of a bugbear for mine for a long time, but it didn't matter for a long time. But it's
Mhm.
popped up again recently, and I feel I need to say something. So
Sure.
yeah. So it goes right back to the 2003 invasion of Iraq by the United States and some other countries. I think they called it the Coalition of the Willing. I'm not going to really comment on whether I think that was, um, you know, the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do. That's not really the point I'm kind of making here.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you're welcome, Bo. If you've got any thoughts on that, feel free to
No, no,
jump in.
only I
But
remember back then I was in school when I saw it happen, so
yeah. So that probably reflects our age difference a little bit because I
mm,
was an adult. Yes, exactly. I was
yeah.
already in Canada actually. Uh, anyway, but the point I want to make is that one of the justifications for it was the fact that Iraq had chemical weapons. Okay. Now this is now I've had long had interest in the Middle East. So when I heard them say that Iraq has chemical weapons, my first response was, well, yes, we know that because they've used them, right? So a lot of people don't know, and really, I just want to talk. All I'm going to talk about here is the facts of the situation, right? Whether or not they had deliverable weapons in 2003 is another question, and it probably looks like they didn't. Okay, but in the Iran-Iraq War was 1980 to 1988, right? So an 8-year war. During that war, Iraq used chemical weapons against Iranian troops repeatedly. Okay, this is well documented. The Iranian troops were injured, they were treated. There were non-Iranians, neutral parties who saw them, doctors and so forth who saw them. It is not in dispute that Iraq used chemical weapons during the Iran-Iraq War. Okay. Moreover, Iraq used chemical weapons against its own citizens in a small town near Mosul in the north of Iraq. The people living in that town were Kurds, which are an ethnic group living in north of Iraq. They've wanted independence or more independence within Iraq. There's also within other countries in the region there are Kurdish groups who also want either independence or at least more autonomy. Anyway, Iraq under Saddam Hussein used chemical weapons against the Kurds in the town and killed several thousand people, I believe, and that was in as in 1988. So so then, of course, obviously after that, Iraq was invaded the first time by the United States. They generally set about dismantling their chemical weapons program at that point. And that seems to have been a genuine effort to avoid sanctions and so forth, I think. Anyway, um, in 2003, there was an accusation there were chemical weapons, and people like myself who sort of knew a bit about the Middle East are like, well, yes, as I said, we know that these weapons were used. That was only 15 years ago. So there's a question about, yeah, exactly how many they had left, whether they were deliverable. But in the years afterwards, uh, between 2004 and 2011, and this I only found recently when I did some research on it a couple of years ago, I think there was some sort of freedom of information request in the United States. That's what we call it here. It's got some similar name there, I guess.
Yeah.
Was a document was released which showed that US service personnel in Iraq were injured by accidental exposure to chemical weapons no less than 6 times. So the weapons obviously were still in Iraq between 2004 between 2011 because they were being stumbled upon. Now, it's been suggested that the Iraqis were trying to hide them for a long time. And as a result, they actually kind of lost them, as in they moved them around so much and they were trying to hide them so well, they themselves may not have known where they were, the Iraqi government. So it may not. So when they said they had destroyed them all, that might have been a truthful statement from their point of view, and that they really believed they had, even though it turned out there were some around. Anyway, the point I'm making is there were chemical weapons before 2003. We know this because they used them. There were chemical weapons after 2003. We know this because US service personnel were injured with them, right? Obviously, they were there in 2003. Were they deliverable? Probably not. Can I say definitely not? No, I can't say that. Maybe they had the ability to deliver them, right? But what bothers me about all this is the dismissive way. It's come up again recently because of recent events. The dismissive way that people have talked about the claims there were weapons of mass destruction there as if it was complete nonsense. It wasn't complete nonsense. There were chemical weapons before, and those are weapons of mass destruction. There were chemical weapons thereafter, and those are weapons of mass destruction. Therefore, there were chemical weapons and weapons of mass destruction in Iraq in 2003. Yeah, they may not have had the ability to deliver them, but that is a far cry from claiming that it was a complete beat up. Anyway, I just want to emphasize that, and the risk because it has come back recently. A lot of people have been talking about this again recently, and yeah, they were there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's all I want to
Yeah.
say on the subject. It's a
Yeah,
bit
sure.
around
Was
left field.
that was
It's become quite topical, as I said.
well, yeah. I mean, do you think it's spurred by the recent Iran bombings for the
That's
most
what's
part?
brought it up again, exactly. Because it used to
Yeah.
be for a few years after 2003, it was a common statement that people would make.
Mm.
But yes, that's exactly what it's brought it up again. How the people are comparing it to the 2003 invasion. But of course, as I said, it's no laughing matter. There were chemical weapons there, but probably couldn't deliver them. But that's a far cry from saying that they're not there.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah. Next thing I've got is the great man of history, Richard Feynman, who's
All right.
kind of a personal favourite of mine as physicists go. So I've got a physics maths background myself. I studied. I started at university studying physics. After a year, I realised that I enjoyed reading about other people doing physics far more than I enjoyed doing it myself,
Hmm.
and switched to computer science mathematics as my
I
area.
see. Yeah.
And anyway, but I've always enjoyed reading what's going on the latest in physics, and Richard Feynman, of course, is quite a character and quite a famous is quite a famous individual in physics circles.
Yep.
So he's a theoretical physicist. So I actually found out a few things about him that sort of while quickly looking at this that I actually didn't realize. So he married his high school sweetheart, even though she had TB, which is incurable at the time, and she actually died a couple of years later. So he married again later on, but yeah, he married her, and I think possibly against the wishes of both of their families because none of their families were present actually. Anyway, he obviously worked on the Manhattan Project, and if you saw the movie Oppenheimer, which was on recently, Feynman was of course a character in that film. I think he must have been fairly junior on the Manhattan Project though, because he would have been in his 30s, I think. And obviously they're all smart guys, but I think he must have been one of the more junior scientists who were working on it. As in, I don't think he was leading a department or anything like that. Apparently, and this I didn't know before, apparently he decided that looking at the Trinity detonation, which was the first atomic detonation ever, not using dark glasses was a good idea. So, and we thought he was, we thought he was smart, right? So he apparently decided that looking at it through a car window would be okay because that would screen out a lot of the UV, which was dangerous for the eyes. But the sheer intensity of light would, of course, be a problem. And apparently, yes, after the detonation started, he had to dive for cover in the car because it was just, unimaginably bright. So, but yeah, I was a little bit surprised to learn that. Actually, I would have thought he's a smart guy. I would have thought he would have realised that
Yeah.
looking at a detonation was a terrible idea.
Hmm.
Uh, He's responsible for the Feynman diagram. I don't know, Vernon, do you have much background in physics? I don't know if we've ever talked about it.
Not too much. Yeah, I mean, I read here or there, but you're probably a bit
Yeah,
more kept up
yeah.
on that one.
So he invented the Feynman diagram, and hence its name, hence the name.
Hmm?
And it's what I find really cool about it. It's a diagram. It's a diagram to explain a subatomic interaction. But what I find really interesting about it is that the Feynman diagram is not just a method of explaining, sorry, not just a method of demonstrating the interaction. It's actually a kind of equation, the diagram itself. And I've never understood Feynman diagrams properly. I really haven't. I have tried in the past. Yeah, maybe one day I'll manage to get them, but
Yeah.
it's quite, yeah. But anyway, I've always found that fascinating that the diagram, it's not just a diagram to illustrate what's going on. It actually solves the equation. It is a form of equation,
Hmm?
which I find absolutely extraordinary. He's also, as like a lot of these physicists, a lot of people in the physics world, and I don't think people outside physics kind of realize this. A lot of people in the physics world are actually kind of quirky, and and this is true in other sciences too, but I think it's mostly true in physics. It's also true sometimes in computer science, but but they often have they often have a broad range of interests. This is very common, and they often have odd or quirky interests as well. Anyway, he was also Feynman, although it's not very quirky, but he was also actually accomplished in a number of instruments. He'd learnt a number of instruments. He was involved in the Rogers Commission for the Challenger disaster, which is actually apparently the point at which he became most well known. Which is
Yeah.
so he'd gone through most of his life essentially without really being well known in the wider public, even though from a physics point of view he was already very well known.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Challenger is the one that tends to come
Yeah,
up.
exactly. I think that's right. Exactly. And apparently, it was he didn't actually want to be in the commission, but he was convinced to do it apparently by his wife. So,
Right.
but one thing I wanted to mention, and I skipped over in my notes actually. Um, Apparently, he was accused of being sexist quite early in his career. Apparently, he'd made jokes about lady drivers and clueless women in his courses. Although there's some, question about the veracity perhaps of some of these claims, but he was known for having quite a good sense of humour. So I wonder if perhaps in some cases he might have even been trying to stir people up. But anyway, he was known for having a really good sense of humour. So,
Yeah,
but as I
well,
said,
making a joke about someone counts as the big bad sexism. Yeah, like
it may well have, exactly. That's right. Yeah. So it's hard to say decades after the event what really happened. But when I read about that, I thought, well, he was known for having quite a sense of humour, and I wonder if maybe some of his remarks were a bit off colour and upset people at the time. But anyway, but yeah, I think he's quite an interesting character. That's just a very quick overview of his life, of some aspects of his life. But I really do encourage people to read a little bit more about him, and I hope he certainly not won't be forgotten in the future. Anyway,
exactly.
yeah. Um, that's actually all I have tonight. It's quite quick, isn't it?
Right, yeah. And I don't have anything this time around, so this one is in fact one of the quicker ones.
It might be a record short episode, but that's okay.
Yeah,
So
that's
I think
fine.
it's 3 weeks before we're meeting again, you were saying.
Yeah, I'll be busy. I will not be able to make the one in 2 weeks, so it'll be
Yep.
3 weeks next time. So
No, no problem at
so
all.
let's not forget
I do
about
have,
our. You have what?
I have Zoe McLellan.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it.
Yep. Cool. Uh, right. As of June 2025, a warrant is outstanding for the arrest of Zoe McLellan in relation to charges of kidnapping, child stealing, and child custody deprivation. McLellan is a public figure who has appeared in numerous popular television shows, including Star Trek Voyager, JAG, NCIS New Orleans, and Designated Survivor. Her face is familiar to millions. It is extraordinary that she's evaded detection for so long. McLellan was reportedly residing in an apartment in River Ridge, Louisiana in April 2021 and may still be residing in the area. McLellan grew up in the area of Port Orchard, Washington State, and may have returned to that area. Some sources believe that McLellan has left the United States and is residing in Canada or Costa Rica. Prior to disappearing, McLellan was known to use the alias Sarah Chandler. Anyone with any relevant information should contact the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Thank you.
All right. Catch you in 3 weeks.
See you there. Bye.
Yep.